So good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for dialing into this show and tell for Family Context. My name's Tom Lowndes, and it's my fortunate position to be the Collaboration and Engagement Manager from Deluxe, supporting this Stockport-led private beta. In today's session, we're going to hear how this platform helps social workers see better data faster in order to make critical decisions. Shortly, I'll hand over to Stockport's Head of Data, Craig Hughes. On to Lindsay Yates, Project Lead. Next, Steve Kilroy-Jolly, Lead Developer. And finally, Will Gregory, Information Governance Manager. And from Project Partners Social Finance, it's John Medley-Hallam. We should have plenty of time for questions after this presentation. And just a reminder that we are recording this session for subsequent sharing, so please ensure that you stay muted until you have a question. Feel free to post questions in advance in the chat, or if you have any accessibility issues, please let me know. And over to you, Craig.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tom. Morning, everybody. My name is Craig Hughes. I'm the head of data at Stockport Council. I've been involved in the Family Context project from the very beginning, and we're here today to kind of give you an update in terms of where we're up to and how things are progressing. So let's move on. What we're going to cover is first of all, why family context. So we'll begin at the beginning. Why we decided to kind of develop this tool, what sort of problems it's trying to solve. We'll then move on to the sort of development, what we've done in terms of the sort of project methodology, what that looks like, some of the sort of challenges that we've had around sort of data governance, data sharing, and what we've done there, and then I guess the kind of master data management solution that's been developed as well, which is the sort of backbone to family context and helps kind of bring together all that disparate data into one place. We'll then run through this sort of usage and the user feedback that we've had from the users, so social workers, and some of the stats around its usage over time. And then we'll talk about sort of future developments, including how we're kind of using some of the capabilities that we've developed as part of family context for other things, such as our NTFP projects and I guess sort of a wider link to our ongoing data strategy development work as well. And then finally, I'll sort of run through the sort of latest roadmap so we can see kind of where we're up to and what we're going to be doing in the sort of final few months of this sort of phase of the project. Okay, so starting off with the sort of purpose of family context. So, a few years back, we identified that there was a need to bring together lots of sort of disparate data for social workers because sometimes they were making decisions based on sort of incomplete information. It was difficult to get access to this data. It could take a lot of time, not sure who to contact, and that can result in incomplete information being used for those decisions. Also, as I say, it took a long time to kind of chase information. So there's examples of social workers having to kind of email around or maybe sort of be sat on hold, waiting for kind of information to come back from sort of key colleagues from across the partnership. So again, we wanted to try and sort of free up sort of social workers' time so they can kind of spend it on sort of more value-adding activities. And then also, all these delays ultimately can put the child at further risk. So again, we want to kind of obviously prevent that as much as possible. So we designed it to save time, provide that sort of more joined up picture of what's happening with the child, what's happening with the family, and ultimately to help social workers with their decision making. This is a quote from the chief social workers at both Stockport and Leeds, who are involved in the discovery phase. And one piece of information can change the decision for a family. And I think Lindsay will come on to this later on, but we found that being able to kind of bring together all this information has been really helpful for social workers, and sometimes has been able to kind of prevent children who are potentially at risk of harm as well. So again, it's really important that we kind of bring together all that information to help with that sort of decision making process. We know the importance of kind of information sharing as well. It's been highlighted in a number of sort of serious case reviews. The independent review of children's social care again highlighted the importance of being able to kind of bring together that information, that intelligence really quickly to help support with the decision making. And we've used the local digital fund to kind of help accelerate this work over the last couple of years, and has ultimately resulted in us developing a tool that we've been using for the last few months now. In terms of the project methodology, we took a sort of iterative approach to the design of family context. So literally started with a paper prototype, putting that in front of social workers, seeing what if this information would be useful. And we kind of over time developed a sort of a series of digital tools, back and forth with social workers, gathering that user research, developing the common data model, and ultimately that ended up with us developing a live prototype that we could use for our private beta that we developed early on in the project. And then, as I say, we've now kind of developed the tool that social workers are using in their daily practice now as well. In terms of the data sets, obviously that's going to be the key thing for us, and I guess a lot of the experience, a lot of the kind of feedback, that we've had from social workers is the more data, the better. But obviously we wanted to kind of hone in on exactly which data sets are going to be most useful. So we did a lot of user research with social workers from across both Stockport and Leeds to identify data sets such as police, housing, adult social care, schools, and education data to begin with. But there's other data sets, and I guess as we've started to roll this tool out, we've got more and more feedback from social workers, which has been really helpful in terms of the sort of development of additional data sets. And we see that this project will continue to evolve over time as more and more data is brought into the tool. If I hand over to Will now, Will's just going to kind of run through some of the work we've done regarding sort of data sharing, data governance.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I think just like Greg said, before we go any further, it's worth talking about our approach to data protection with the family context tool. So data protection by design is something we've tried to focus on heavily. The information governance team have been embedded in the project right from the very start of it. And well, when I say that, I mean myself, really, in order to provide advice and guidance, ask the right questions, assess any risks that are involved, and also put any appropriate documentation in place as well. So that documentation includes a data protection impact assessment, which we've created, and we've also put together some advice for people using the tool, which is now embedded in the training program they go through. We're now entering a phase in the tool and in the rollout, which is particularly important, and we're hoping that our approach to data protection by design can bear some fruit. And what I'm referring to there mainly is some new external data sets we're looking to bring in. Sorry. So with regards to the data protection impact assessment, Craig spoke about phases and iterations just before then, and that's the same with the DPIA. So the DPIA has kind of evolved throughout the family context project, right from the pilot up until now. So we're now in our third iteration of that DPIA. So what the DPIA does is it ensures all the risks that are associated with regards to data are reviewed and addressed, and we try to identify those risks and mitigate them as well. So it's a piece of work that ensures we remain compliant with data protection legislation, but it also plays another role as well because it's key for promoting the tool to third parties to try and encourage them to share data with us as well. So discussions aimed at securing those desired data feeds are underway with both GM Probation Service and also Stockport Foundation Trust, and providing assurances to them with regards to governance and data protection via the data protection impact assessment are really, really key, and hopefully will help us cement those data feeds as well. There's a heavy focus on identifying legal gateways for those third parties, so that they know what lawful basis and legal gateways they can rely on when sharing data with SMBC. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to upfront identify those gateways and build them into that data protection impact assessment as well. So for example, when we approach probation, we've detailed the Crime and Disorder Act and Criminal Justice Act. With regards to NHS data at the Foundation Trust, we've identified the NHS Act, the Care Act and the Children Act. And that's just among a number of other legal gateways we've identified as well. So what we've done is we've actually detailed the specific excerpts from those laws and built them into the appendices of the DPIA. So whenever we share that DPIA with a partner, they are able to get an understanding of the legality behind sharing that data with us. One of the key legal gateways identified is the Digital Economy Act. So we focused heavily on that and built that into our data protection impact assessment and based a lot of our data sharing on that. So in order to use that that legal gateway, we actually secured support directly from the Cabinet Office to make sure we're using the legal gateway properly, and to kind of help us encourage the data sharing from those partners that we want to work with. So we actually have had a member of the Cabinet Office join us on our call with probation that we had recently to try and set up that data feed. So all of the data feeds that we set up will be governed by standalone data sharing agreements. So there won't just be an overarching one, because each of the data feeds will be so different. So we'll put a data sharing agreement in place with each partner where we set up a feed. And the other thing I wanted to cover is transparency, because the key with that is to continue to monitor our privacy notices and make sure they're accurate and up to date. So as we bring in new data, new feeds, we need to make sure we are being transparent with people and letting them know where our data is coming from and what we're doing with it. But it's also worth considering there that some of the data is we are bringing in so that when they're doing a child social care assessment, a lot of the data is actually already being shared on an ad hoc basis. This is just about standardizing it and making it easier for them to access and speeding up the process and efficiencies. So that may not be as big a job as it sounds, because a lot of those privacy notices are already quite accurate and up to date. You can just go on to the next slide for me. Yeah, and this next slide just details the actual data feeds that we are looking at. So we've got schools data, which is an internal feed, which is actually live at the moment, but we're looking to expand that, and I think Steve is doing a piece of work with regards to that. We have adult social care live, and we are looking at the youth offender service data, and that's in progress. That's something we're looking to bring in the near future. With regards to those external feeds I was referring to before, we have housing data from Stockport Homes, which is already live, and we're looking at health data from Stockport Foundation Trust with regards to health workers and school nurses. That's something that we're trying to put in place, and we've had meetings regarding that recently. And also GM probation, that's another one that's in progress as well. We did look at police data, but following meetings with the police, we decided that it wasn't able to be in scope for the family context at the moment, and that was mainly because of concerns from their side with regards to the data quality and the system that they use as well. So there's just a few of the challenges listed there as well. So like I mentioned before, getting buy-in from external agencies, the fear around releasing large amounts of personal sensitive data, lots of questions around GDPR, privacy and security, and those are the kind of things we've tried to address in that DPIA, and complexities within systems and difficulties around extraction. So those are some of the challenges that we've faced with regards to data sharing. And I shall pass on now.
Brilliant, thanks Will.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think obviously sometimes data sharing, access and data sets can take quite a bit of time. Thanks to all the hard work that Will and his team are doing, plus this kind of support that we're getting from central government, I think is kind of helping with some of this. So we are making progress in some of these areas. Some areas faster than others, but yeah, I think it's a challenge with all of these sort of similar projects to family context, where you're trying to bring together lots of disparate data. But yeah, that's kind of where we're up to with that one. I'll hand now over to Steve now, just to talk through our master data management solution.
Thanks, Craig. Talk about fixing the plumbing. There's been sort of a lot of work and a lot of sort of wailing and gnashing of teeth over the past year or so in terms of trying to match some of these data sets together. We've matched data from our sort of key social care systems, which are both in Liquid Logic as a product and education system, and we've also brought in data from our sort of key housing partner, Stockport Homes, who use 3 separate databases currently, and they're just about to migrate to a new combined database, which may or may not make our life easier. We've sort of used a tool called FME to do our sort of data matching, which is basically on an underlying SQL platform. So we're doing lots of sort of matching on sort of unique identifier fields and some sort of fuzzy matching around names and addresses as well to try and bring that data together. A number of sort of unexpected side benefits in sort of doing that data matching is, as part of the data matching, we've identified where we've got things which we're not sure whether it was a match or not, and that's provided us with sort of an avenue where we've highlighted some data quality issues in some of the source systems that enables us to identify, particularly with some of the feedback as well from the pilot element of family context, areas where there might be duplication. The pilot worked really well for us, where we had some things where people were coming back to us and saying, well, I would have expected this person to have had some housing data, but we've not had any housing data come back for the individual. And that's enabled us to find that perhaps in the source systems there wasn't quite the information, or the information wasn't quite in the same format. So there's discrepancies in data across systems, and we've managed to use this process to really set up some sort of formal routes now to improve our data quality in those source systems. So on our daily data matching process, where there are things which perhaps aren't quite a match, but we think there's a probable match, we've got to now routes to formally put those as output reports to go back to the system owners so that they can then look at the data quality. Similarly, it might be that there's been duplicate records created in some of the source systems, and again, this matching process is really helping us to identify those and sort of improve those things, which, again, talking back from that initial first couple of slides where I think Lindsay highlighted issues about the potential for serious case reviews there. If you've got sort of a duplicate record for a person in a social care system, and the social worker's looking at one system, but there's pertinent information in the other record that's been set up accidentally for the same person, the potential for missing something crucial doesn't bear thinking about. So again, where we can identify those duplicates and sort of flag them back to system owners to get them corrected, it's sort of really key benefit that's come out of the system as an unexpected benefit. In terms of challenges, we've been quite slow in bringing in some of the additional data sets. Again, Will mentioned sort of youth offending there. Again, some of these source systems, particularly things like youth offending and some of the other things, they come from a range of legacy systems, and some of the data quality, particularly around addresses, has been fairly difficult. We sort of, when we use our address matching, we're sort of linking back to our address-based gazetteer and using the unique property reference number. Some of these systems don't have UPRNs in, so we're looking at things which have been manually entered as addresses there. And so we're having to sort of do a lot of data cleansing to really get data to a good enough quality that we can be confident of the match. And again, it goes back to what I just said. Yeah, if we're not confident on the match, then we really don't want to bring in the data set with the potential of missing a key piece of data there because we've not matched someone correctly, or we've matched them to the wrong person. So we've taken our time on this because it's been really crucial that we get it right before we release it, and not release something that's missing. Because again, we don't want someone looking at something saying, oh, there's nothing against this person for youth offending, so there's no concern, so we'll just move on. There's inherent risks of doing that, so with mismatches or false matches. We've also had difficulties in accessing other data sets, and again, Will mentioned briefly that there's delays on the police data. They're currently in the process of rebuilding their own data systems and getting a new system in place. So there's discussions going on out with the Family Context project at a sort of Greater Manchester wide level about getting access to GMP systems, Greater Manchester Police systems, for supporting families purposes. And again, hopefully once those negotiations get on board and they've got their new systems in place, we can revisit that and get on board. Similarly, we're looking at the probation service data jointly for Family Context and for supporting families work, because there's sort of strong alignments between the two. Probation is currently held on sort of managed by Ministry of Justice rather than by Greater Manchester Probation themselves, the underlying database. So there's a lot of questions about getting access to that. They're keen for us to sort of supply them with a cohort of data which they can then match for us, but obviously the nature of Family Context means we don't know who's going to be the subject of an inquiry from one day to the next, so it doesn't really work in that way. So again, we're still ongoing with those negotiations for access to that data, but we'll get there, I'm sure, at some stage.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, just I think, yeah, we'll realise that none of this is easy, and I doubt there's very many councils, if any, that have like a single record for an individual or a family. And obviously you can use things like the property gazetteer to try and identify, have a unique record for a property and so on. But I think one of the secondary benefits that we'll come on to later around the benefits of family context is just kind of making us think about how we kind of join up our data better. But yeah, I'll touch on that towards the end. So I'm going to hand over now to Leslie just to kind of run through the tool itself, some of the usage and feedback that we've received as well. If I can get this to work, there we go.
Thanks, Craig. Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to talk a bit about the actual tool itself now. So family context, it's really, one of the good things about it is it's really quick and easy to use. So I am also a qualified social worker myself, so I understand what social workers are going through, how they feel, what the obstacles are to working. And one of the big issues about this initially was the fact that they thought they'd have to learn a really complex system, and it's not. It's just a couple of clicks. You search for the person that you want and the information's all there in one page. So basically you search for a person, and straight away, once you get to their page, it shows which agencies are involved with that family at any one time or within the last 12 months. It provides simple, minimal information. So the idea of it is to aid, not to do the job for them. So all you see when you click on that agency is a contact person, a key worker, and contact details. One of the things that was an issue previously was that when we were getting a referral in, we weren't understanding who was actually working with that family at that point. And sometimes you would work with a family for, say, 6 months, and you still wouldn't know which agencies are actually involved. So family context shows you straight away who's involved with the family. I don't know if you want to move on, please, Craig. So we got some feedback from the social workers about the tool and what the thoughts were, and the key theme that came from it was that it saves them time. So previously what would have took them 2 hours took them like 20 minutes to do. It helped to pull together multi-agency meetings quickly. So one of the big things is if you've got a case that comes in that's high risk, then you need to pull together a meeting immediately within sort of 4 hours. If not sooner. So this tool was allowing that to happen, whereas before it could have been hours, maybe days before you could get people around a table to understand who was working with that family and to understand who was needed to work with that family. One person fed back that they were able to notify the police immediately about a child who was in a situation where they were possibly living with a person of high risk. So a couple of phone calls and the police were able to visit that property within an hour, whereas that child could have been spending the night with that person, and we wouldn't have known about it. So those are just some of the things that have come back from the tool. So one of the other things we do is we monitor usage as well, so we're able to see who's using the tool. And what I've noticed is that there's sort of a key pattern. So the teams are on duty, they have a duty rota, so they might be on, say, once every 4 weeks. So you can see that the usage goes up during that week where new cases are coming through and new assessments have to be started. One of the things I'm going to be doing over the next few months is visiting team meetings just to understand usage, and for those who are not using it as much, why they're not, so that we can just improve it even more. We also did an evaluation of the pilot initially, and what we found from that was that it saved, per social worker across Stockport, it saved 190 hours per year and 16 hours a month across the whole of Stockport, based on around 100 social workers. It was 19,000 hours a year and 1,585 hours a month. So what we decided to do was another evaluation of the rollout. So we've done the phase 2 rollout, So it's live and it's used by all workers. They've all been trained up in Stockport to use the tool. And actually the results were pretty much the same. So 184 hours a year per social worker at 15 hours a month, and 19,402 hours a year, 1,534 hours a month. Some of the challenges was getting buy-in from social workers, and initially they thought that they'd have to learn this complex system, but I think it helped because I am a familiar face as well. I've worked in Stockport, so they know me as a colleague, so I was able to sell it that way. I was getting into team meetings, showing them the tool and how easy it was. They were quite surprised about how easy it is to use. I also was able to build relationships with the senior managers so that they could cascade the information down to the workers. But yeah, that's it from me.
Brilliant, thanks, Lindsay. So I'll just pass back to Steve now, just to kind of talk through some of the sort of latest developments that we've seen in family context.
Sorry, just realised I was on mute there.
No
Yeah, the slides in here is just an example from what we've got currently in our test system. And I'll say straight away, this is dummy data. It's not a real person before, and no worries about that. But one of the new developments we had previously, we just had contact details for the school. So, you know, what school they're at and who's the contact point, telephone number, email, etc. for that school, and whether they were at a different school as well, or whether it's the only school they attend. We've brought in, this is piggybacked on against some of the work we've been doing for the new Supporting Families Outcome Framework. Just details about the current attendance records. We've looked at, for family context purposes, to sort of keep it in line with the other indicators, a full year's worth of data. So we looked at the last 3 complete terms, just what the unauthorised absence level is for a pupil over that last 3 terms, and also the very recent data about what it is on the current term to date. Just whether we consider that absence to be within or higher than the accepted levels, with the accepted level of being sort of less than 10% unauthorised absence. I've just seen your question there about whether we're all on the same IT systems. Most of our maintained schools use the same IT systems. We bring that in. We have got a small number of academies and 3 schools in the borough who aren't using our system. We're currently in the process of coalescing data from our sort of main synergy system, which we bring in, but also from the data which is submitted to DFE for the school census. So for where those schools that aren't using our systems, we hopefully can pick up the census, although there'll be a sort of lag on that, so we won't have that data for the most up-to-date data for the current term, but certainly for that most recent 3 complete terms available. Hopefully within a sort of a month or 2 of that term finishing, when the next census takes place, we should have that data available for pupils who aren't at schools that aren't using our systems. So that gap should be plugged. And again, that's something which we're currently working on as part of this development, and should all be in place by the time it's released to a live system. And again, I mentioned previously about youth offending data. Once we've got that sort of cleaned up as well, we'll have similar things going in for there. And again, that will give details of anybody who's had an active intervention over the past 12 months or so from youth offending. Once again, but much dependent on getting the data quality right before we bring it in.
Thanks, Steve. So just last few slides. So we've been promoting family context as much as we can. So we have regular sort of blogs that we publish, just to kind of update in terms of where we're up to with the project, what we're seeing in terms of feedback and so on. We included family context as part of our LGC award submission, and thankfully we were successful in that award as well. And we've also done some sort of talks and attended conferences and things just to kind of promote what we're doing and kind of spread the message in terms of what benefits we're seeing with family context as well. But obviously we're keen to do as much of that as possible. So keen to get views and thoughts in terms of how we can sort of further promote the tool. In terms of the sort of updated project plan, so this is the project plan we shared back in I think it's earlier this year, sort of January, February time, in terms of what we were intending to do from April onwards. we've sort of rag-rated each of the different areas. It was broken down to three sections really. So at the top, you've got the rollout to family context to all the social workers. The second part was adding the known data sets to family context. By known data sets, I mean, we have access to them and we can pretty much get going with them. And then IG gateways for the more complicated data sets. So they're data sets that we don't hold, things like health, probation, police, that type of thing. So yeah, the rollout went successfully, and I guess the adding the data sets, we've made good progress there as well. It's just taken a bit longer than we thought because of kind of the data quality issues and things like that. And IG gateways, we continue to work on those, as Will has said. And I think finally, just to kind of summarize really, just what we're doing with the kind of capabilities that we develop for family context is we're able to kind of reuse those for sort of multiple sort of use cases. So things like the supportive families outcome framework that Steve mentioned a second ago. All the work that we've done for family context helped with that. The bringing together and joining up of all these disparate data sets helps with things like that. But then also some of our MTFP proposals. So like every council, we're facing sort of budget challenges at the moment. So we're looking to see how by joining different data sets, by having sort of a single record of a property of a family of an individual can help with some of our sort of MTFP proposals. So things like fraud prevention, identifying sort of single views of debt, that type of thing, helping with our electoral canvassing. All of those wouldn't be possible without the work that we've done for family context. So yeah, that's all been really helpful. And I guess just generally, it's really been helpful with the development of our data strategy as well. So the second outcome of our data strategy is all about joining up our data, and from a citizen perspective, a resident perspective, it feels like a joined up council. You only have to enter data once, and that should then cascade out through multiple systems. We can join things up behind the scenes. We can understand resident, client, patient, pathways, all the various touch points with various council and partner services, and also just in terms of sort of generating insight and intelligence. Having that kind of more joined up data set is really helpful for that. So it's been really helpful for lots of other projects that we're now able to do that perhaps we would have struggled with previously. So yeah, there's lots of secondary benefits as well. So I think does so apologies, I can't see the chat, so I don't know how to just stop sharing for a second.
Yeah, you're good, Craig.
Okay, brilliant.
John, do you want to take over sharing?
Yeah, I will try to. Can anyone see that?
Success.
Great. Cool. So first of all, I should kick off. So who are Social Finance? Just a quick intro, because we are not a local authority, but we've worked with Stockport and Leeds for quite a while to develop the initial case of family context. So Social Finance, we're a non-profit, and we work with ambitious organisations, including central and local government and communities, to design, fund and scale better solutions. Specifically for this programme of why we're leading a sort of scale work stream, we have a lot of understanding and domain expertise around children's services, and we actually helped to support the delivery of family context back from 2018. And then also we've got a lot of sort of skills scaling data tools across local authorities already, just a couple of examples there, as well as sort of a deep relationship with London local authorities. So that's kind of where we're coming from on this. And what we're trying to do in this, so it's a little bit different to what Stockport have been discussing. I suppose Stockport have implemented Family Context Live, whereas this part of the project is about what would it take to scale. And we've specifically looked at London local authorities with a vision of, can we get to 10 or something like that under a sustainable model? And of course, that's under the assumption really, based on the 2 evaluations done in Stockport, that this is high impact. So we know it's saving time for social workers. And we know that more relevant information is getting to them quicker, and so hopefully a better identification of risk. I mean, the impact of this is kind of obvious. I mean, lots of reports, as Lindsay and Craig mentioned about the importance of data sharing, and then it needed to be done sooner. In terms of work streams, that meant sort of 3 work streams for us. So sector engagement, we went out to local authorities, looking to pilot in one of them, and then thinking about the organisation design there. So the key bit of that last exam question is, what is a sustainable model for this? There are plenty of ways of doing or scaling projects like this that sort of go gradual and one by one, but what is the way that this can be done at scale sooner? So any conversation about scale really needs to talk to what we're actually scaling. And so the first part of what we're trying to do is sort of whittle down what are the core components of family context that need to be scaled. And so we've come up with these 4 here. So the first is safeguarding, family composition, service information, and a one-stop shop. By safeguarding, I mean the sort of statutory duty that local authority children's services departments have to protect children from neglect and harm and to promote their well-being. So family context needs to be around that safeguarding use. So you've heard Will talk a lot about sort of data protection side. All of that is formed around the legal basis around safeguarding. And some other sort of use cases for family context might include early help or other professionals, but they aren't covered by that same sort of data protection. The second thing about family composition, so you could just put together all of the information that a child accesses across different systems like health or children's services, but actually the key part of family context is knowing who are the other siblings or children or adults that are associated to that child that you're looking at. The third is about sort of actionable service information. So we're presenting stuff that people can make decisions about. So it's very practical. You can either phone a professional, you know their name, or you can make a decision about something, about the risk. And then the fourth there, kind of related to what the impact is about saving time. This is about bringing together lots of data sets from different domain areas or different services. It's not about going really deep into one system. So we're not trying to recreate Liquid Logic or Mosaic or some other case management system, going really hard into children's social care. This is about bringing together key information from lots of different domains. So what do we do in terms of sector engagement? So we went out to all of London. I think we repeatedly engaged multiple local authorities. And of those, a third were interested, and so we're really happy with it. Like a third of those, so 12 London local authorities replied and were interested. And of those, we took 4 along and through a kind of scoping phase. What that means is kind of trying to go through what the appetite was in the local authority, both from the service, so the children's social care team, did they want to do this? Did they have space and capacity to do it? And then also from the sort of data and technical team, because family context, as you've seen with Steve there, it takes a reasonable amount of development time to do. And so we needed to understand what was the feasibility or how much effort would it take for a London local authority to do this. And then we sort of whittled that down through a different process, and we selected one local authority to pilot that with. So in order to do that, though, it is worth very quickly going over the technical approach. I've kept it super high level. If you want any more detail, you can speak to our tech lead or Steve from Stockport. But basically what you're trying to do is extract data from different sources, match it together, store it somewhere secure, and then create a view so that someone with the right, who has the right permission to view it can see it. And so what we've developed is so a bunch of components which are repeatable and some which aren't repeatable. So you don't need to really know the sort of any of the stuff on the right hand side. But basically there are the bits of that which are easily repeatable and lift and shift. So that product offer stuff there, we've got stuff on GitHub code that is reusable and can be shared across anyone. There's some stuff that's more of a service offer, so advice and guidance that someone like Stockport or like Social Finance can support another local authority because we've gone through the process of developing it themselves, so we can sort of shortcut a lot of time. And then there always will be a sort of an element of what the local authority has to manage itself, sort of denoted by these like SAW icons, like bespoke. But there's sort of 2 or 3 parts of what it takes to deliver family context, which will always kind of be worked through. So what I wanted to do is just sort of talk a little bit about the key elements of delivery of family context across these sort of 4 theme areas that we've seen. This isn't just by talking, you know, working with Stockport and Leeds, which was a little bit earlier on, but also going out in the sector. So we've done those sort of 4 scoping local authorities. So we've understood what position they were coming from. And then we're also hoping to reach out to Bristol and Somerset, who've developed very similar looking products to family context. On the technical side, I think the key thing to get over is sort of the data matching is not a it's not an easy requirement and has sort of lots of nuances and challenges around it. And it's important to say that this is a key part of, or when family context was originally designed, is something that a local authority would need to do. And in our experience today, there is a bit of variation with whether local authorities have experience of matching records together anywhere within their teams. And that's quite important. To go from sort of nothing to creating that sort of data matching is quite a considerable amount of effort. Second point around technical is the code itself. So even though I sort of mentioned there are some easily open source components of family context on GitHub already, that actually whatever we produce needs to be understandable by a local authority, because the local authority is essentially managing and maintaining whatever they've developed. Anything that needs to change needs to be understood by their existing workforce. And so when you develop open source components written in different languages like Python or C#, we need to be aware that when another local authority tries to replicate that and implement it and host it, that they have expertise internally, whether it's in the same languages that we've developed it in. On the technical side, though, there is an important foundational stuff. So supporting families program in many respects is about bringing together and matching data across lots of different service involvement. So I suppose a lever on the technical side is a lot of local authorities are having to think about this already, because it's a key part of their funding now within children's services. So it's just something to bring up. On the cultural side, so cultural motivational, sometimes they sound very similar. So what I mean by cultural is like, what are the behaviors, attitudes and practices between people within an organization, and the motivational is more about incentives and value. So when we're thinking about developing family context, I'm sure the team at Stockport can attest to this, it requires really good working relationships between the service, so social care, with IT or tech, so people who are developing and coding, and then data, so the people who are extracting. We have seen a variation of how used to those different departments are with working with each other. Some large local authorities can be very siloed, and actually that sort of developing a project which requires input from those 3 different kinds of stakeholders is really important to get this across the line. And that necessarily means that you've got someone who can speak kind of the language of those 3 different stakeholders and has the authority to make decisions. The other key part about cultural is, I suppose, about digital maturity, is a relationship between the senior support and sort of middle management layer. We've seen quite easy to kind of sell family context at a senior level. It makes perfect sense, put together data, value to the service and to the local authority, but that requires some key people in a sort of middle management layer. And so having both bought in and that kind of like open attitude to do something new is very important. On the motivational side, I think it's really key to say that this problem has stuck around for quite a while. Lots of people have been trying to do this for decades before I started work. And there is still some failed initiatives and attempts to do this, and it kind of really sticks with people. A couple of local authorities we worked with, there's really, the social workers that we kind of spoke to, real negativity about systems, getting data and things like that. And so you're working sometimes from quite a low motivation, kind of openness to change point of view. And having someone who is able to sort of push something through internally is very important. And that's obviously something to think about at scale, because usually you think about scaling a digital product like, I don't know, something like Spotify or something like that. It's just a product that people just buy. whereas what we're talking about here is a product that is managed by a local authority. So it's very hard to scale an individual who has sufficient sort of contacts within a local authority. And then the last one around financial, again, it kind of goes to the point about are different departments within a local authority used to working with each other, and the sort of the difference between OPEX and CAPEX. So in some places we've seen actually in social care, heads of service have enough authority and budget to commission different technologies if whatever they want. Whereas in other areas that is sort of delegated to IT, which actually sits under finance, and these people are quite removed from who will be gaining value from a tool. And so that's really important to know. And I just thought I'd run back to supporting families. We know in Bristol and Somerset, they actually had the coordinator of the supporting families program had sufficient authority to ring fence to a certain amount of money per year to spend just on developing their system. And so having control of that budget is very important lever. So what does this mean for scale? So these are a few things, not that we've worked them out completely, but a few different considerations at scale that we'll have to work through. The first being fidelity versus fit. So if we've got those 4 core ingredients of family context that we're trying to scale, I think what we've noticed by speaking to different local authorities is that some of them will want to change the fidelity of the model to fit their own practice, but then that might be very different to what we've done in Stockport and Leeds, which has been evaluated. And so we've heard lots of different things about how family context should be used. So a different use case, like flagging risk rather than a triaging, like a flag coming up with this child has now been in these different services, so a bit more proactive. We've heard different users might want to use family context, so schools or GPs. We've heard that potentially it's replacing a case management system for sort of smaller data sets like youth offending or community safeguarding. And then fourth, about a completely different kind of purpose, like using like audit and legal across local authority. And that's obviously interesting because, again, going back to data protection and what you develop projects and infrastructure around, if you're using it for different purposes, we need to be very clear that that isn't contained in the original kind of data protection work. Second point is the different starting points. So I've mentioned already different sort of digital maturities, data maturities for different local authorities. And this is very important because if you want to scale something quickly and across multiple areas, you have to develop something that's common. So a common, but you can't create different bespoke software for lots of different local authorities, especially if you're trying to get to that 10. And so different starting points where people coming from, either different tech languages that they understand or different, whether they have their services on premises or in the cloud, like these all mean different things to what a common product might look like. And so something that we have to consider. Third is effort versus value. A lot of those, so you see the sort of, we've got 12 who were engaged from London local authorities engaged that went through to 4. Lots of them dropped out because of their perception of effort versus value. This goes back to the historic case. Lots of local authorities tried this before and it failed. So there's a perception that it's really high effort to do this. And then the value sometimes is not particularly clear. People understand what it's trying to do. But I think what we've learned over the last couple of months is articulating that value in terms of time saved to local authorities, which from the Stockport case was about 2 hours per social worker per case. So getting that across and that value sits within one team, but it might potentially be used by other services as well. It's very important when thinking about scale. Because all local authorities, when they're assessing the risk of a new project or buying something, they need to make this decision. And then the last point there, kind of essentially what the end of this piece of work is trying to do is figuring out what is the right platform to take this on, what's the right organization to scale this. And so we're looking at, main part of that is that the maintenance and sustainability of any product is usually the thing that kills it. So it's great, creating alphas and betas and getting stuff launched. There's lots of energy around new stuff and funding, But some of the tougher bits are like, what are the long-term, you know, in 5 years, how do you maintain something or improve it and make sure it fits? And so thinking about that needs to be done now. And so we're interested in a few different options. So I'll quickly go across 4 of them, but could be like a community kind of model, a little bit like local gov Drupal, which is like this web, quickly building websites for local government, so that you don't have to do that. And there's a community around that. Second option might be like a consultancy offer, more of, you know, just one by one going to local authority and trying to scale it that way. Third is around off the shelf, so using things like digital marketplace. And is there a way that we can develop family context under like a software as a service model, so it's just off the shelf? And then fourth, might be relatively interesting, is like, could this solution sit within central government somewhere? So we started conversations with DFE, who are doing some work basically exactly the same as family context, but part of what they're trying to do is think about a consistent child identifier, and their thought is that can be used to essentially make the data matching process a bit easier, but it could be that elements of this could be centrally held within government. So we're kind of exploring what are the advantages and disadvantages of those different options under a platform model. What does this mean for next steps, or what's our roadmap? So essentially we've gone out to the sector, trying to understand, and we whittle it down to 4 and then 1 to do a pilot with. The pilot actually fell through with the one local authority that we were working with, and so there are a few lessons to be learned from that. Some of them were more specific to that local authority's current context. But what we're doing now, I think, is going back out, think about awareness raising, not just within London, but actually across England and Wales, potentially. Thinking about what those repeatable patterns are. So I mentioned there are components that could be lifted and shifted. So can we package those up so it's more consumable for other local authorities? And then in next, we want to go back to understand more about the sort of different starting points that local authorities have. Think about whether any are interested in forming as some kind of community, whether that's light touch or more involved. And then I think we have enough space actually to, when I say make the tool cheaper, I sort of mean make the costs of running it by a local authority less. And so there are ways that we can adapt the technical infrastructure and the code so that it's a lot more off the shelf, not completely a software as a service, but something, you know, getting towards that. And in the future, I think what we'll have is some kind of well-defined what the organisation might look like, how much that might cost, where that sits, what they would do, and have that sort of validated. I think that's the end of the presentation. I've got some questions to the audience, but I think they're a bit more, might leave those to general questions and come back to those at the end.
John, thank you very much indeed. So I'm conscious we've got just 5 minutes now. Does anybody have any questions for the experts? I've got one. And this relates specifically, and I think actually I'll address this to Craig, but John, you might join in. So it's bearing in mind accessing police data for both Greater Manchester and the Met Police seems to be the most challenging. Is there capacity to test and implement this data when it does get released, which could be next month, it could be next year? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so so one of the challenges we've got with GMP is they implemented a new system, and there's some sort of data quality issues, so they're looking to fix those. So just don't have any capacity to work with us at the moment. So what the fact is, work that we did with Leeds, we'd identified a list of offences that we needed, because obviously we don't want to kind of match against everything, and I'm trying to sort of summarise where we got to in terms of the conversations, but obviously the police have a lot of offence information. We've been interested in like driving offences and things like that. We're very kind of specific in terms of the list of offences we'd need, and it was just then how do we, because again they're very nervous about kind of sending over all of the offence data. Yeah, how do we kind of get that kind of matching process so that we've got a finite cohort of individuals at the Stockport end? Obviously they've got all of Greater Manchester at their end. How do we kind of make sure that we're kind of joining everything up correctly? But in terms of the capacity, I think we will do. It's just there's obviously a lot of kind of exploration work that needs to be done, kind of analysing this kind of quality of those data sets. There might be a sort of a win-win for us as well in terms of sort of improving not only the quality of the data within Stockport, but also at the GMP level as well. If we can kind of have some data flowing back and forth in terms of like up-to-date address details. I don't know what it might be, but yeah, I think it would be a big one, that one. But we just sort of repeat the process that we've gone through for all the other data sets. So get access to the data, once we've done all the kind of the IG and we've got all that agreed, test out how we're going to kind of connect them up, test out the kind of quality of the data, and then I guess all the work that Steve and his team have done, just kind of repeat that process again. But yes, it's been slow progress, unfortunately, but it's just one of those things.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's really interesting. Ben, got a question.
Hi everyone. Firstly, just great presentation. Really interesting to see where things have got up to. It ties in quite nice. I thought I'll just give you kind of an update on where things are in Leeds, and it fits quite well into that point around the police. So we'd obviously done a lot of work with Stockport and social finance early on, and we got a lot of the data feeds kind of in place. The one that we didn't sort of have fully set up was the police. So we took the decision not to launch because we felt that actually the police was probably the biggest bang for the buck in the data sets. And we felt in terms of getting people to adopt it and to take it on, having that in would be the key one to get people using it, because we felt that the other data sources people could get access to probably would take them more time, but the police was the one that they'd struggle with the most. So we've been kind of working through getting that resolved, and the timing's quite good. We had an information sharing agreement set up with the police that we signed a couple of weeks back. We've got some testing that we now need to do with the police to make sure it works and the data quality is sufficient and so on. But we're setting up like a secure file transfer site so that we can basically deposit all the kind of the families from our Mosaic system. The police will collect from the secure file transfer site. They will do the matching, and then they'll return those families with the offence data, and then we can bring that back into our system. So what we want to do at the moment is test, can we do that on a daily basis? So if we send that through, can we cope with that level of processing and so on at the police end? And then obviously how we bring that back in. But as Craig was alluding to, a big thing with that was working through kind of some of the ethics, getting the level of data right. And effectively what we've done is we've split the offences into a more detailed view of the things that have a sexual or violent element to it. And we'd basically look and say, if those offences have ever occurred, we'd want to know about them. For the lower level things, we're effectively just basically saying, has it happened? I think we've said in the last 2 years. And for those, it's more sort of a skimmed level of detail, really, just a kind of an idea that these things have occurred. But then you kind of get in that picture, because one of the things as well that we debated, particularly in terms of the timeliness, is some offences can take a long time to prosecute, particularly the sort of the sexual violent aspects. So we didn't want things to drop off that might have been taken a long time to get through. So hopefully once we've done the testing with that police data, and we're satisfied that that's working, then we're going to be looking at planning our sort of pilot. So we've identified our social work teams, but once that police bit is kind of in place, then yeah, we can look to sort of launch that. So it might be interesting to have another conversation just to look at kind of what the experience has been in Stockport when you've piloted it, really, because we felt one of the key things we needed to plan for really was an evaluation from a practice perspective. So having that information and what impact is that having, and how is that changing the kind of business as usual, and then having a kind of a technical evaluation that runs alongside it, like picking up on, are we getting matches where we'd expect to get matches, and is it picking up the information that we expected to pick up, and is the tool working as anticipated, and those kind of things. So we've got all that sort of plan for, really. So it'd be good to sort of learn from your experience, and I think the point about having somebody like Lindsay in place would be really powerful. I think our social work teams have been very receptive to it, including our kind of management structure. They're very keen on the idea, but I think having someone who knows the life of, I suppose, a social worker, encouraging them to adopt the tool could be really useful. So that would be something I'd want to feed back to our team here, really. But it was just to share that, really.
I'm conscious we've just gone over by a minute, but if anybody, I will be uploading this video later, so people feel free to stay on because we'll carry on and hear Steve. Yes, Steve.
Yeah, it's just a follow-up for Ben there, really. Just as we're going down the road of sort of developing the crime stuff when we get access to it. You mentioned about sort of the offence dates there and sort of things taking time for convictions. I know in sort of my previous existence, when I was looking at some of the early phase of troubled families work, as well as sort of the offence data, we're also looking at sort of vulnerabilities of families based on whether people have been through as victims rather than just the offence data. And I was wondering whether that was something you picked up on as well.
It's been part of what we've considered in this iteration. We've focused more on the kind of the perpetrator aspects of it, but yeah, I think it is something that, you know, potentially we'd want to explore, the kind of the victim aspect. In some ways, I mean, something like, you know, if a family's experienced domestic violence, if that perpetrator is not in that family unit, we might not necessarily get that information flagged up. But you would if you were potentially looking at them as victims. So it's something we haven't included at this stage, but I think, again, some of this is that kind of get the door open, test it, show that it works, and then you can kind of look to develop it and expand it and think, you know, how else could we support what we know about these families and the help that they need. So it's something we've definitely considered. We focused on perpetrators to begin with, but yeah, I think there's definitely something about looking at victim data as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Obviously, allow you guys to direct message each other, but I'm going to close this meeting. So thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution today. We'll post a link to this recording via email and Slack once uploaded to our YouTube channel. Thank you very much again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.